Salvete omnes! In this lesson, we will learn the perfect tense. Before watching this video, please read pages 29 through 33 in your textbook. This lesson will cover the following topics: the perfect tense, personal endings, and principal parts. Remember that Latin has 6 tenses. By now, you know the present tense, which expresses ongoing action occurring in the present. Here's curro, run, conjugated in the present active indicative. Curro, I run, I am running, I do run. Curris, you run. Currit, he, she, they, it runs. Currimus, we run. Curritus, you all run. Currunt, they run. You also know the future tense, which expresses ongoing action occurring at some indefinite time in the future. Here's curro conjugated in the future active indicative. Curram, I will run, I shall run. Curres, you will run. Curret, he, she, they, it will run. Curremus, we will run. Curretis, you all will run. Current, they will run. The perfect tense in Latin expresses actions completed in the past. The word perfect comes from the Latin verb perfactio, which means to complete. Now let's take a look at curro conjugated in the perfect active indicative. Cucurri, I ran, I have ran, I did run. Cucuristi, you ran, you have ran, you did run. Cucurrit, he, she, they, it ran, has ran, did run. Cucurrimus, we ran, we have ran, we did run. Cucuristis, you all ran, have ran, did run. The third person plural has 2 forms, cucureirunt, which is far more common, and cucureire. Both are translated the same. They ran, they have ran, they did run. If this paradigm looks a bit strange, that is because the perfect system, tenses that express completed actions, uses a different stem. Just like the present and future tenses are formed based on the stem in the first principal part, the perfect tense is formed based on the stem in the third principal part. We will explore principal parts in a bit more detail later in this video. Before we do that, however, let's see if we can identify any patterns across the present, future, and perfect active indicative endings. With a few exceptions, the endings for each person and number are very, very similar. Take the first person plural in the present, future, and imperfect tenses. Currimus, curremus, and cucurrimus. Each of these end in mus, M-U-S. These common endings, ost, mus, tis, nt, are called personal endings. All finite verbs, no matter the tense, voice, or mood, will include these personal endings with some minor variation. In some ways, this makes your job memorizing endings a bit simpler. If you internalize the personal endings ost, mus, tis, nt, and their corresponding subject, person, and number, mus being first person plural, for example, you will be able to figure out the subject of any verb you come across, even if you are unfamiliar with the verb itself. That's 2 out of 5 attributes when parsing. Back to principal parts. Remember that whenever you look up a verb, its lemma, or dictionary form, will always contain its 4 principal parts. This is so that you have all the information you need to be able to conjugate the verb in any tense, voice, or mood. Until this lesson, we have only made use of the first principal part. The first principal part will always be the verb's first person singular present active indicative form. In this case, scribo. This principal part is used to form verbs in the present system, that is, all tenses that express incomplete or ongoing action. We know 2 of these tenses, the present, and the future. If you take off the personal ending, o, from the first principal part, this leaves you the appropriate stem for the present and future tense conjugation. The second principal part will always be the present active infinitive form of the verb, in this case, scribere. The second principal part is included to demonstrate what conjugation a verb belongs to. Remember, verbs are grouped into conjugations based on their thematic vowel. We only know one conjugation, third conjugation, which is marked by a short e in the second principal part, scribere. The third principal part will always be the first person singular perfect active indicative form of the verb, in this case, scripsi. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the third principal part contains the stem necessary to form all verb tenses in the perfect system, that is, tenses that express completed action. In this video lesson, we have learned our first of three tenses in this system, the perfect tense. Again, if you remove the ending I, you will be left with the appropriate stem to conjugate any tense in the perfect system. The fourth principal part will always be the nominative singular perfect passive participle form of the verb. Depending on the resource, the fourth principal part will be either masculine or neuter, so in this case either scriptus or scriptum. If the dictionary or textbook uses the neuter nominative singular perfect passive participle, this may also be referred to as the supine. We haven't learned supines or participles yet, so you don't have to worry about those for now. As a reminder, you should take care to memorize all four principal parts for each verb in your list of vocabulary in addition to their definitions. Before we end this video, let's practice the perfect tense. Conjugate pono in the second person plural present active indicative. Posuistis. Conjugate pono in the second person singular present active indicative. Posuisti. Conjugate pono in the third person singular present active indicative. Posuit. Conjugate pono in the third person plural present active indicative. Posuerunt. Conjugate pono in the first person plural present active indicative. Posuimus. Conjugate pono in the first person singular present active indicative. Posui. Now let's try parsing. Parse miserunt. Miserunt is third person plural perfect active indicative. Now parse Amy. Amy is first person singular perfect active indicative. Parse wikimus. Wikimus is first person plural perfect active indicative. Parse rexit. Rexit is third person singular perfect active indicative. Parse scripsisti. Scripsisti is second person singular perfect active indicative. Parse petuistis. Petuistis is second person plural perfect active indicative. Now let's translate a few sentences. Translate into English, agricolae verba mea non legerunt. Agricolae verba mea non legerunt can translate as follows. The farmers did not read my words, or the farmers have not read my words. Let's try another one. Scripsistine, amice, nova verba? Scripsistine, amice, nova verba translates as follows. Have you read the new words, friend? Or, did you read the new words, friend? Excellent work. Now you know another tense. Remember to practice your forms consistently. This may take the form of writing out verb paradigms, conjugating all your vocabulary words, or playing games on Magistrula. We have many more forms to learn, and regular practice will make reading so much easier. So go forth and memorize these endings. Waleta!